A customer brought me their lawnmower and told me what it was doing, and I have to admit, the problem was kind of strange. But after looking at it for a couple of minutes, I realized something. Turns out they were doing their own maintenance, which typically means they shouldn't be having these kinds of problems. However, they were missing one important item, and because of that oversight, they can now barely use their mower. In today's video, we're going to be looking at this Murray push mower. And the problem is that it starts and runs. However, after some time, the engine will start chugging and has been known to stop on its own. Now, to be honest, there are a couple of reasons for this to happen, so we'll have to weed out all the other causes. But before we go on, I would like to record all the stickers we can find. That way, if we need to order new parts, we'll get the right ones. Now, there's no way to tell just how many hours are on this mower. However, with the build date over a decade ago, I'd say this mower's been used quite a bit. So our first sign that things are not as bright and shiny as they appear to be is the engine oil. So yes, it looks to be in good condition, however there's several more ounces than there should be. Too much oil can actually hurt the engine, so let's hope this was a recent event. An even better way to tell if someone's been taking care of their mower is by looking underneath it. But what we find is actually quite good. It seems they were trying to keep it clean, and not only that, but keep their blades sharp as well. Now it seems like they were doing a pretty good job. That was until we took a look at the air filter. Now foam material is great for a lot of stuff, but as an air filter it's not that good. Unless you add oil to them, then it's not bad at all. The problem is that this air filter is dry, meaning a lot of dirt may have gotten past it and done some damage. So it's been running for several minutes and the engine should be good and hot. Let's see how it starts back up. Now the good news is that the engine started back up with no problems. But the bad news is that the engine has a slight shudder which can be seen and even felt in the handlebar. Now this could be caused by bad gasoline or possibly even a carb issue. But the other possibility is that the valve clearances might be out of tolerance, which has the ability to cause running and starting problems. Now there could be one other reason for this problem, and that is a combination of all three issues mentioned earlier. Basically, the fuel might be just a bit too old, and the carb is working but not at its best. And finally, the valves might only be slightly out of tolerance, not enough to cause any real problems, but still get in the way. So as you can tell, I'm going to give this mower a quick spray and rinse, but you most certainly don't have to do this if you don't feel like it. Although there is at least one area that you probably should check for dirt and oil, and that is the top of the engine. The top needs to be cleaned because this is where the cooling fins are, which of course helps to keep the engine from overheating. This engine, however, happens to be fairly clean, but a good spraying never hurts to keep it that way. It's been a couple of hours, and because of lighting, we've had to move the table, but at least the mower is now dry. Now to start off, I ended up tipping the mower over while it was on the table to take out roughly about 6 ounces of extra oil. If you do this, you'll need to check the oil level a couple of times to make sure you didn't take out too much oil. Just make sure the mower is on level ground when you do this. Too much oil could cause a problem, but not when it's only about 6 ounces too much. We're going to need a whole lot more oil than that. But you know what else could cause our problem? Bad fuel or water in the fuel. So this gasoline is not that old and stale, but what's sitting at the very bottom does concern me. What you're looking at is a blob of water, and if you find it in the fuel tank, that means there might be more in the carb. I think it would be a good idea to take the carb off and examine it for any water or any other issues too. Now you could just take the carb off, however, I find it a whole lot easier to take the fuel tank off with it. But you are welcome to wrestle with the short fuel line and take just the carb off. But doing it that way does make it a bit more challenging when it comes to disconnecting the governor linkage. Also, make sure that the O-ring and its plastic retainer are still stuck to the back of the carb and not on the engine. I took this one off just to show you how it goes back onto the carb. I've also been told that if this is not installed correctly, the engine is unlikely to start. And finally, we're going to take the screws off holding the bowl to the carb and see what's inside it. And surprisingly, there's only gasoline and no water in the bowl. I guess water in the fuel is not an issue, but there could be something else wrong with the carb. Up next, I want to take out the cartridge from the carb and see if there's anything wrong with it. So this is the main fuel jet, and if it's clogged even partially, it'll keep the carb from working like it should be. But after running my cleaning wire through the jet, it appears to not have made any difference. But don't forget the other openings on the other side of the cartridge. If they're blocked, it could cause our problem. That's when we noticed our next problem. The cartridge was not put back together completely, which I've never seen before. Now I have to wonder if someone's already looked at this carb and didn't put it back completely. Not only that, but because the air filter didn't have any oil on it, dirt was able to get inside the cartridge. These openings in the cartridge have a specific job to do, so blocking them with dirt is going to affect the carb. So after cleaning all the extra dirt from the openings in the cartridge, we'll then carefully put it back together. This time, however, we're going to make sure those two pieces snap back together. But of course, if you don't want to deal with this kind of detailed work, then just order a brand new carb instead. Now because these are made out of plastic, they're not very expensive at all. So for the low price of only $15, you can avoid this part of the repair. But to be completely honest, if you intend on just replacing the carb anyway, then it wouldn't hurt to take the old one apart and see if you can fix it. Once the fuel bowl is back on, check and make sure that it's sitting square on the carb, otherwise if it's crooked, then it might start leaking fuel. And if you have a mower with an active fuel leak, I'd recommend not using it, otherwise you could end up on the internet. When installing the air filter base, make sure to connect up the emissions breather hose to the port on the back side of the base. If you don't, unfiltered air could make its way into the carb and engine, causing all sorts of problems. Next comes the part where the owner messed up at, which is to oil the air filter. Now you can use motor oil if you feel like it, but I like using a thinner oil instead. Just keep in mind that each oil has a different schedule when it comes to cleaning and reapplying the oil, so choose wisely. Next up is the part that I think is the most important when it comes to maintenance, which is checking the valve clearances. Now on certain engines, the clearances take a long time to get out of tolerance, but it really depends on the runtime. This engine seems to take about 50 hours before it needs to be inspected. So the valve cover is stuck to the engine, so be very careful when persuading it to come loose. Because if you do it the wrong way, you could end up damaging the gasket, which will then need to be replaced. Now to begin the process, we need to rotate the engine until one rocker arm is all the way down, while the one we want to check is all the way up and loose. We'll then take our 5/1000 of an inch feeler gauge and see how it fits between the valve and the arm. And surprisingly, it fits just like it should, which just barely drags in the clearance. That means this one is good. We'll then rotate the engine until the one we just checked is all the way down, while the other one is up and loose. We'll then repeat the same process here, however it turns out the clearance is much too tight because the feeler won't even fit. We'll then hold the adjusting nut while loosening the jam bolt. We'll then be able to turn the adjusting nut until the 5/1000 of an inch feeler almost gets stuck. And once we're satisfied, we'll then hold the adjusting nut while tightening the jam bolt. Now I know it looks a bit confusing, but once you do it the first time, it should make more sense the more times you do it. Once the valve cover is back on, you'll have to keep an eye out for an oil leak from this area. Since the valve cover was stuck to the gasket, it might be damaged and could leak once the engine is running. Now just to prove that the gasoline wasn't the problem, I'm going to pour in the majority of what we pulled out of it. Of course we can't put it all back because that blob of water is still in it. And after checking for a fuel leak, we can finally prime the engine and try starting it. So it's been running for several minutes and the engine should be really good and hot. Let's see how it starts back up. And as you just saw, it's running a whole lot better than before and there was no sign that it was going to stop. Of course, just to make sure, I'm going to use the mower on my own yard, which should be about 45 minutes of runtime. So what exactly was causing this mower to run poorly and stop running after several minutes? I'm going to say it's a combination of valve clearances being off and a dirty carb. Now the valve clearance on its own wouldn't be enough, but pair that with a carb problem and I think you've got a huge problem on your hands. So my question is, have you ever had a problem like this one before? This is not a common problem, but when it happens, it can be very frustrating. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.